You've been doing everything right. You cut the carbs, you tracked every calorie with obsessive precision. You dragged yourself to the gym 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and you spent hours grinding away on that treadmill until your legs burned and your lungs begged you to stop. The math was simple. Calories in, calories out. You were disciplined. You were consistent. You were doing what every fitness magazine, every online coach, and every well-meaning friend told you to do. And yet, you stand in front of the mirror, and that stubborn layer wrapped around your midsection hasn't moved. Not an inch. If anything, it looks worse. Softer, more inflamed, more permanent. Like your body is actively mocking every sacrifice you've made. And that feeling, that deeply frustrating, demoralizing feeling of doing everything right and getting nothing back, is not a sign that you are weak. It is not a sign that you need more willpower or more discipline.
There is a biological reason your belly fat is holding on for dear life, and it has nothing to do with your character. It has nothing to do with your commitment. What is happening inside your body right now is far more sophisticated, far more ancient, and far more powerful than any diet plan ever accounted for. Your body has activated a hidden survival mechanism, and while you are out there trying to burn fat, your internal chemistry is receiving the completely different set of instructions. Instructions to hoard it, instructions to protect it, instructions that treat your stored belly fat not as a problem to be solved, but as the most valuable emergency resource you own. Understanding this mechanism, really understanding it at the biological level, is the difference between spinning your wheels for another year and finally watching that waistline change. So let's go deep.
Your visceral fat, the fat that sits behind your abdominal wall, wrapped around your organs, is not the same as the fat on your thighs or your arms. Research has confirmed that this deep fat is chemically unique. It is densely packed with cortisol receptors. Now imagine those receptors as ultra-sensitive antennas, high-gain receivers designed specifically to pick up the faintest stress signal in your bloodstream. While fat in other areas of your body might largely ignore a low-level cortisol pulse, your visceral fat is wired to detect it, amplify it, and respond to it immediately.
Every time your stress hormones rise, whether from a work deadline, a bad night of sleep, an argument, or even the stress of undereating, your belly fat is the first to answer the call. And here is where it becomes truly alarming. As visceral fat grows in response to cortisol, it doesn't just sit there passively. It begins to function like an independent organ. It releases its own inflammatory chemical signals, cytokines and adipokines, that loop back into your system and trigger even more cortisol production. The fat tissue itself begins recruiting stress hormones to ensure its own survival. It is no longer just responding to stress, it is manufacturing it.
This is also why the feedback loop that nobody talks about. The more stressed you are, the more visceral fat you accumulate. The more visceral fat you carry, the more stress hormones your body produces. The cycle is self-sustaining, self-reinforcing, and without intervention, completely relentless. It feeds on the very thing that is destroying your quality of life. This is also why you might know someone who eats very little, exercises regularly, and still carries a noticeable belly. From the outside, their lifestyle looks disciplined, but inside, their nervous system is running a chronic emergency broadcast. Their body has been in crisis management mode for so long that it has essentially locked the fat vaults and swallowed the key.
Now here is where most people hit a wall, because they assume that if they just cut carbohydrates hard enough, their insulin will drop and the fat will finally burn. And in a vacuum, that logic is sound, but cortisol doesn't care about your dietary choices. When cortisol is chronically elevated, it walks straight into your liver and issues a direct command. We need fuel now. The liver, being the extraordinary biochemical factory that it is, responds by manufacturing glucose from amino acids, from muscle tissue, from whatever raw materials are available. This process is called gluconeogenesis, and it is one of the most important survival mechanisms your body possesses. Literally, the creation of new sugar from non-sugar sources.
So consider this scenario. You wake up after 5 hours of fragmented sleep. You haven't eaten since the evening before. You skip breakfast because you were doing intermittent fasting. Your cortisol is elevated from poor sleep and the accumulated stress of your daily life. Your liver, receiving that cortisol signal, begins dumping freshly manufactured glucose into your bloodstream. Your pancreas detects rising blood sugar and releases insulin to manage it. You are now sitting in a fully fasted state with simultaneously elevated cortisol and elevated insulin. And insulin is the master switch that shuts down fat burning completely. Your fat stores are sealed. The key is gone. And you haven't even eaten a single thing yet. This is the trap that is swallowing people whole. And it is driven by 3 specific patterns that seem completely reasonable on the surface, but are biologically devastating when you understand what they actually signal to your nervous system.
The first is what happens when you make long, moderate cardio the foundation of your fat loss strategy. For decades, the message has been relentless. Move more, get your heart rate up, log your steps, spend an hour on the treadmill. And millions of people have followed this advice with total dedication and gotten progressively worse results. Here is why. Evolutionarily, your body has a very specific interpretation of sustained, moderate-intensity physical effort. It does not read it as a healthy lifestyle choice. It reads it as a long migration. A desperate trek across difficult terrain in search of scarce food. Your ancient biology cannot distinguish between you jogging on a climate-controlled treadmill and your ancestors covering 20 miles of savanna in search of a meal that might not exist.
In response to this perceived famine march, your body raises cortisol to keep you going. It suppresses non-essential functions. And most critically, it begins breaking down muscle tissue, converting it into glucose through that same gluconeogenesis process we just discussed. Because muscle is metabolically expensive, and in a perceived famine, expensive tissue gets cut first. The devastating irony is that as you lose muscle, your resting metabolic rate drops. You burn fewer calories just existing. Meanwhile, all that elevated cortisol is directing fat storage straight to the visceral region. You are literally dismantling your body's fat-burning engine and using the parts to build more belly fat. The scale might drift down slightly, but your body composition, the actual ratio of muscle to fat, is getting worse with every session.
The second trap is fasting done wrong. And this is particularly painful to confront because fasting genuinely is one of the most powerful metabolic tools available to us when done in the right conditions. It triggers autophagy, cellular cleanup, insulin sensitivity restoration, and profound hormonal recalibration. But the right conditions matter enormously. If your stress load is already high, if your sleep is already compromised, if your nervous system is already running hot, then adding aggressive fasting to that equation doesn't reset your metabolism. It confirms its worst fears.
When your body is already under siege and then detects an absence of incoming nutrients on top of that, it interprets the combination as famine confirmed. The thyroid begins to downregulate to conserve energy. Conversion of the active thyroid hormone drops. Your extremities get cold. Your mental clarity fades. Your energy crashes. And your body clings to visceral fat with both hands. Because in a true famine, that deep abdominal fat is the last resort fuel reserve, the emergency generator. And your biology will do absolutely everything in its power to protect it. The goal of fasting is to lower insulin. But if the stress of the fast provokes enough cortisol to trigger a liver glucose dump, you have canceled the entire benefit. You are not fasting.
You are starving and stressed, and your body knows the difference.
The third trap is the quietest and in many ways the most destructive because it happens while you are unconscious. You are in bed. You believe you are resting, but your metabolic system is running a silent alarm. You fall asleep from sheer exhaustion somewhere around 10 or 11. But then, somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, your eyes open. You are not groggy. You are alert, almost wired. Your mind immediately begins cycling through tomorrow's tasks, unresolved worries, things left undone. You watch the ceiling for an hour before finally drifting back into a shallow, restless sleep just before your alarm tears you out of it.
This is not just poor sleep quality. This is a hypoglycemic stress event. As you sleep, your blood sugar naturally declines. In a healthy, metabolically flexible body, your system manages this smoothly and quietly. But when chronic stress has depleted your liver glycogen reserves and compromised your metabolic flexibility, that blood sugar drop happens too fast and too far. Your brain, which consumes a disproportionate amount of glucose relative to its size, perceives this drop as a genuine emergency. It activates the adrenal glands. A shot of adrenaline fires into your bloodstream, followed closely by cortisol, both designed to wake the liver up and flood the system with glucose. The adrenaline is what opens your eyes. You're experiencing a full fight or flight activation in the middle of the night, not because of any external threat, but because your own metabolic system has declared an internal emergency.
The consequences compound overnight. You miss the deep, slow-wave delta sleep stages, where growth hormone is secreted in its highest concentrations. Growth hormone is your most powerful fat-burning, muscle-building, anti-aging hormone. It is the biological counterweight to cortisol. And you are missing it entirely because your night is being hijacked by a stress response. Every hour you spend in that fragmented, cortisol-soaked semi-sleep is an hour your body spends in fat storage mode rather than fat release mode. You wake exhausted, inflamed, and with your belly fat receptors primed and ready for another day of accumulation. So how do you break out? How do you convince a body that has been running a chronic emergency broadcast for months or years that the crisis is genuinely over?
You have to speak the language of the nervous system. You have to send biological safety signals with enough consistency and precision that your cortisol levels actually drop, your insulin normalizes, and your visceral fat loses the hormonal fuel it has been feeding on. The first intervention is deceptively simple, but profoundly effective. You stop using movement as punishment and start using it as a metabolic management tool. Specifically, you take a brisk 10 to 15-minute walk immediately after every meal. Not a casual stroll, a purposeful, slightly elevated pace walk. Here is why this works at the cellular level. When you contract your skeletal muscles, those muscles have a mechanism for absorbing glucose directly from the bloodstream that bypasses the need for insulin entirely. The muscle contraction itself opens a backdoor channel. By walking right after eating, when your blood glucose is at its post-meal peak, you are using your muscles as a glucose sink.
Add small pauses to key ideas before the pancreas needs to respond with a large insulin spike. Less insulin secreted means less fat storage signaled. Less post-meal cortisol stress, better digestion, steadier energy through the afternoon, and over time, dramatically improved insulin sensitivity. 3 15-minute walks after meals equals 45 minutes of metabolic impact with zero cortisol cost. Compare that to 45 minutes on the treadmill, which spikes cortisol and signals famine, and the strategic superiority becomes obvious.
The second intervention targets that 3 in the morning crisis directly. If you are the person whose eyes are opening in the middle of the night, wired and anxious, the solution is to prevent the blood sugar crash before it ever happens. The protocol is a small teaspoon of raw honey paired with a small pinch of high-quality sea salt taken right before you go to sleep. Before you dismiss this as counterintuitive, understand the mechanism. Raw honey provides a specific type of slow-releasing fructose that the liver converts to glycogen, effectively topping off your liver's fuel reserves before the overnight fast begins. With those reserves adequately filled, your brain does not detect a fuel emergency at 2 in the morning. The panic button never gets pressed, the adrenaline never fires, the cortisol never surges. The salt contributes by supporting adrenal function and helping regulate fluid balance, both of which are involved in that nocturnal cortisol spike.
What you get in return for a teaspoon of honey is an uninterrupted, deeply restorative sleep cycle. You stay long enough in slow-wave sleep for growth hormone to do its work. You wake up having spent 8 hours in a genuine hormonal fat-burning environment rather than a stress response storage environment. The caloric cost of that teaspoon is trivial. The hormonal return on that investment is enormous. The third intervention addresses the exercise intensity question without bringing back chronic cardio. You want to signal your muscles to grow and your growth hormone to spike, and you want to do it without loading your cortisol system. The answer is brief, infrequent, all-out effort. Once or twice per week, you find a hill, a stationary bike, a stretch of open ground, and you sprint. Not a jog, not a moderate pace run, an absolute maximum effort for 15 to 20 seconds. Then you stop completely. You rest fully. You let your heart rate recover.
This is biologically the closest thing to what your body was actually designed for. The ancestral hunt was not a marathon. It was a short, explosive, high-stakes burst, followed by extended rest. That pattern, intense effort followed by genuine recovery, triggers a massive release of human growth hormone. Studies have documented increases of 400% or more following this type of training. Growth hormone is the direct biological antagonist to cortisol. It builds and preserves lean muscle, and it specifically targets visceral fat for mobilization. By doing dramatically less volume but dramatically higher intensity, you get the hormonal signal without the chronic stress. You build the engine instead of dismantling it. Your nutritional approach matters just as much as your movement strategy. And the key principle here is that if you are going to fast, you must make your eating window count in a way that signals abundance, not scarcity. When you finally do eat, protein must be the foundation of that meal, not an afterthought. Protein triggers the release of glucagon, a hormone that directly opposes insulin. It is the most satiating macronutrient, meaning it turns off hunger signals efficiently. And it provides the amino acid building blocks your body needs to maintain and grow lean muscle tissue. A practical target is to aim for roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of your target body weight across your eating window. If your goal weight is 150 pounds, you are aiming for 150 grams of protein within the hours you are eating. If your current fasting window is so long that hitting that number becomes impossible, then the fast is too long. Shorten it.
Widen your eating window. Get the nutrition in. Because a body that is adequately fed with protein reads the environment as safe, and a body that feels safe begins releasing fat.
Take 60 seconds before a meal, before sleep, or during a moment of transition in your day, and deliberately generate a feeling of genuine appreciation. Not a thought about gratitude, an actual felt sense of it in your chest. The warmth of sunlight shifts measurably. Your autonomic nervous system transitions from sympathetic activation toward parasympathetic dominance. Cortisol is chemically suppressed. Done before eating, this improves your digestive enzyme output
and lowers the insulin response to your meal. Done before sleep, it shortens the time it takes to fall into deep restorative rest. Done consistently, it begins to chip away at the chronic cortisol baseline that has been feeding your visceral fat for months. It costs nothing. It takes 60 seconds. And it works because it is operating directly on the hormonal mechanism, not around it.
Pull all of this together, and you can see the complete picture clearly. Your belly fat was never a calorie problem. It was never a discipline problem. It was a hormonal signal problem. Your body received chronic messages of threat, scarcity, and emergency. And it responded perfectly and predictably by holding on to its most strategic energy reserve. The solution is not to punish it harder. The solution is to change the signal. You walk after meals instead of grinding through cardio. You sprint briefly and rest completely instead of jogging endlessly. You protect your liver glycogen overnight instead of letting your brain trigger a midnight stress response. You eat enough protein to signal safety and abundance when you do eat. And you use the cortisol and oxytocin seesaw deliberately in your favor.
When you do these things consistently, the threat signal fades. The antennas in your visceral fat stop receiving a constant emergency broadcast. The feedback loop that was manufacturing its own stress hormones begins to wind down. The fat, having no more cortisol to feed on, begins to mobilize. The locks come off the fat vaults. Energy returns with a clarity and steadiness you may not have felt in years. The brain fog begins to lift, inflammation drops, and that stubborn, immovable layer around your midsection, the one that survived every diet and every cardio session you threw at it, finally begins to respond. This is not about doing more. This is about doing the right things in the right sequence to speak directly to a frightened metabolism and tell it clearly and repeatedly that the war is over.